Well, yeah, I see COVID as a huge opportunity. I've had a personal belief, which is one I've held, that we haven't done well enough in schools. You know, when you think about at the end of secondary education, you're talking maybe 55% of the school 16-year-olds leave with gold standard qualifications. You know, your old money 5, subjects at 5 or above, or the old money 5A to C. So you are condemning another 46% who just didn't make that benchmark. And after the years of investment in primary and secondary education, I just don't think that's good enough. So I think COVID offers us a different opportunity to work smarter. I think the explosion of technology and how we can better use technology to make sure kids are not left behind. Every school had to move to some sort of online learning, and that's given us a chance to really develop that platform, whether it's Google Classroom or Teams, how we've taught remote lessons. You now have a new world where actually you could stick a camera in the back of your classroom, broadcast the lesson on Teams. You're processing the 25, 26 kids in front of you, but there might be another 4 who are at home for whatever reason, and straight away they have no reason to not engage in a lesson, even if they're ill at home, but were well enough to participate in the lesson. So I think there's an opportunity there to say, well, how do we deliver content in a slightly different way? And I think building content for the online classroom is something else. It's an area that schools will have to sort of appreciate and take on board. Say, well, actually, how can we make a lesson still engaging for young people who are not physically in the classroom? How can we make that more interactive? How can we allow them a voice into that online platform? Because we're told we have to learn to live with COVID. So there might be different variants that are going to come along. That might mean actually we go back to a state of partial lockdown, and schools just need to be ready to be able to process that. I think well-being has been a real big issue now in terms of what's gone on and how do we look after vulnerable teachers as well. And I mean, we had lots of examples where kids were in school but the teachers weren't. So in this instance, it was teachers delivering the lessons from their front room and the kids in the classroom with a cover supervisor, sort of managing the behavior, but work itself being delivered by that trained, qualified teacher. So I think that's another area that we are looking at in terms of how do we enrich the learning itself. And I also think the built environment has been a real topic across the country over this COVID period. Talking about ventilation, talking about the size of classrooms, have we got the buildings in 2021 that are fit for purpose, because it can be potluck depending on which part of the country you're in. What does your school look like? Is it one of the new build schools, or have you got a school that was built in 1930, still has a small corridors, small classrooms, and how do we actually meet that challenge effectively without bankrupting the government? Because essentially it's not we need more money, it's about maybe being smarter with the money that we do have. And the other big issue I think for us to consider in terms of COVID is the legacy education that the kids have missed. Because ultimately at the start of COVID, there was a lot of shutdown, and a lot of the online learning was given out but not necessarily measured in terms of how far have these young people travelled. So I know there's talk about how we reshape the curriculum, maybe actually condense the curriculum for the current year 10s and 11s so that they are able to access public exams next year. But are we then robbing those children of their right to a full and broad offer? Because if you condense your history curriculum, I'm a history teacher, you say, well, we're only going to teach these 5 topics, and essentially in 20 years' time, would that young person be able to have a conversation in a pub about an element of history that they never got a chance to be exposed to? So how do we wrap that around? How do we create more space within our school day to allow a fuller curriculum? Obviously, it might be Saturday intervention, it might be lunchtime, it might be after school, but we've got to think creatively. I think condensing the curriculum just to help young people pass exams takes us back to where we are now, where 54% of the young people do relatively well, and 46% don't.
Picking up on what so take the two questions I've just asked you. You've got the opportunities of blended learning, and are we just going to forget that and just say, well, okay, we'll come back to normal education, and we've got a problem because we've missed over the content, so let's condense it? Where we're missing a trick in the sense of the reason I asked the question is that one of the schools we work with started at COVID and said, actually, here's an opportunity. I'm going to use my surplus staff and I'm going to turn them into online tutors. Now that school is still, they've got 3 contracted members of staff who would have been full-time in the classroom and are now full-time online. Well, between them, they're covering a full timetable because they see the implications of exactly as you said, moving forward, an uncertain future, face-to-face, not necessarily being permanent, some kind of blended experience being there. So they've taken the opportunity of the data that they know within the app and said, well, actually, here's a future for us. Let's do something that's online. Now that has implications for excluded pupils, school refusers, the challenge when they come to get them in the classroom. And we know that some learners have really engaged with online learning where they didn't.
As a model.
As a model.
Yeah.
So are we at a point, a kind of hiatus of change? Is that?
Yeah, I think we have to allow some natural osmosis here in terms of, I think this is an opportunity for lots of schools, lots of school leaders to try different things, because essentially we'll then be able to evaluate to see actually where the real success is and what's been the cost of that success. For instance, in terms of blended learning, I don't think we should ever go away from that now, because ultimately there is a huge opportunity.